Hello gang, it's Thursday, November 14th, and I'm trying to save this piece of wood. I don't know what the heck. Oh, this is, I don't know what I did use this for. And it had some holes that were countersunk, and I can use this piece for my doorstop molding that's across the top of the door. I only need 28 inches. So I could probably reuse that hole there too, but anyway, as a little bit of a exercise in futility, I wanted to show you how I closed up that hole. It's not quite hard yet. Give it a little bit extra juice. So that's the finished product, ready for sanding. The way I did it, I just got done cutting some wood, so I had this nice sawdust. I scooped up some and just kind of jam it in the hole there. Okay. Sorry about that. Make sure I got a mound, not a valley. Get rid of the extra. And then I drip super glue on it until it soaks in. And while it's still wet, I give it a quick shot of this, lay the wax paper on top, and then put another piece of wood on top to make it flat. And bada bing, there you go, man. Alright, so I'm just using this department store super glue, and it's not the right product. This is where I keep all my super glue up here. I normally would use, there's 3 different grades of super glue. Oh, there's a bottle right there. I think this is all hardened up. This is from Home Depot or Lowe's. Pretty sure it's all hardened up, but it doesn't really say what it is. This is consumer grade. You know, this is consumer grade stuff. You go to the hobby store and it's thin, medium, heavy, maybe even extra heavy. The thin is like water. That's the right super glue for this type of operation because it really soaks in and penetrates like crazy. So what's going to happen here, you know, this has got a nice area where the glue soaked in to the wood, but you know, it's just a thin little cap of super glued wood shavings because it's too thick to really penetrate. So if you had the extra thin stuff, it'll soak in really deep. And while we're talking about super glue, I got this baking soda here. This has been here for years. It's not for the stink, although we got some of that around here. When you use that thin super glue with baking soda in this methodology here, when that thin super glue soaks in the baking soda, it makes it kick off instantly and it gets rock hard. It's great for working on like fiberglass and filling in stuff. But anyway, I thought I'd show you. Pretty good trick. If I hit this with a belt sander, that'd look great. I'm actually going to trim it because I got to cut this down to 11/16 of an inch thick. So what we're doing is we're working on our door seals today. I guess I should have started with that. So I got this scrap piece of leftover cursed wood, and I cut. It's a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch. Actually, what I did was I pulled the door seal, this door seal out of here, and I was using various drill bits to measure the width of the groove that was in there, and it's the next 64th less than an 1/8, which I think is 7/64. So I mean, didn't do this very precisely because I'm just doing, you know, testing, trying to figure out how I'm going to make all this work. I've decided to use this type of door seal. Okay, because it's got this slick nylon kind of surface. It's really, really, really tough stuff, and it does a great job. I mean, stuff's been here for years. All right, but the challenge is right. I gotta set it to where it's tight enough where the door's not gonna rattle. That's gonna be kind of a trick. I mean, that's the normal tension for a house door, but I need to go a little bit tighter, maybe a 1/16 of an inch tighter. If that make it too tight, I'm gonna have to slam the door really hard to get it to catch. Make it too loose, the door's gonna rattle, right? So let me go show you what the plan is here. With this test piece, I was just playing around trying to figure out how it's gonna set in there, and with the insulation in there, the doorstop seal, you know, it's about 3/16 or so. And it depends on how much force I put on it for how tight is it going to sit up against the door, right? So when I get that, this is kind of tough, man. I'm going to cut my pieces of wood that go here now. I'm going to cut them to 11/16 of an inch thick, like this is, just because I just don't need that much bulk. And I'm going to cut off this 7/32 inch little dado thing here. And then we're going to put the door seals in place, and I'm not going to be able to drill holes. So once I drill a hole, that's where it's going to go, or I'm going to have to live with the hole, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stick method, like this thing right here. That's just a stick, and it's a little bit longer than the area that it's bridging, and you just jam it in there. So I'll put a few of those sticks up and down this, and I'll do some, you know, maybe I can put a clamp on here or two. Yeah, my deep throat clamps will probably go on there, because this is the side that's going to take the hit. So now I could test fit the door, that when I slam it, it's how tight I want the door to sit up against the latch mechanism here. So that's the challenge I'm working on now. Oh, and the other thing too is this side, the doorknob side of the door, because the body isn't made exactly even on this side as it is on the hinge side, it's wider down there than it is up there. So this piece is going to have to be tapered if I want it, and I do. I want it to be flush with this all the way, the whole full length. So the only way that I'm going to be able to achieve all these things at once is I'm going to have to make it bigger than it needs to be, do the temporary install with the sticks, and find out where this thing is, where I want it to sit. Then I can drill a couple holes in it. I guess I'll just do a few in case I get it wrong. I could patch the holes up, right? Once I get this thing set where I want it, then it can come in the back of this with a little stubby pencil and put a line on the back of it, and then I'll know where to cut this to line up with this. So yeah, and so now that's going to take here. I've got some great strides here the last couple of days. That's going to take care of how the side, the top, and the hinge side door seals are going to be, and I'm very happy with how it's turning out, and it's going to do a good job sealing. I don't have any qualms with how it's coming out. But the bottom is a whole nother story. All right, I don't want to have a threshold that I'm going to step on. I want the step to stay smooth, flat. So my search for trying to find a seal that'll seal the bottom of the door, I finally got it resolved. I found what they call a door sweep. It's like a bristle brush with an aluminum strip. They sell them on Amazon. And I'm going to attach that down here with screws So it rests on this. Now it's not going to be waterproof, really. I mean, like airtight waterproof, but once it gets wet, it's going to act like a solid waterproof seal for the most part. Mainly, it's just going to be there to keep the dirt and the dust out from driving. And I'm comfortable with this step always being in some level of being wet, you know, dirty, wet, or whatever. This is going to be my first step that will be the dirty step, okay? And that's why I made it aluminum, so it's corrosion resistant. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to put any kind of finish on it. This is going to be the step. But it's slicker than cat poop on linoleum when it's wet. So I'm going to put, you can buy adhesive, anti-slip tape, I guess you'd call it. It's kind of like, almost like sandpaper, but not quite that aggressive on the surface, and it's got a really good adhesive on the back. And I'm going to put some strips on here so it won't be a hazard. And the last strip will be out here on the near the very edge. So that takes care of my slipping issues. It takes care of sealing up the bottom of the door. I'm really happy with that. I don't think I can come up with anything better than that. If I try to make it completely waterproof, I'm very likely to fail, and then we'll end up with water puddling in here. I'd rather have it to be slightly less than waterproof, because this leans out quite a bit. So if we do get water in here, it's going to try to escape. So it'll be able to work its way through the little corner piece down there, or maybe leak through the bristles. So that's what we've done so far, and slowly but surely I'll get to show you all those details. Well, I just went and cut my wood to 11/16, and there's what the super glue and sawdust patch looks like. You almost can't feel it. This one had a little bit less of a countersink. Kind of wish I had filled these other holes too. I was anxious to cut it to see how it looked and share it with you. For the little holes, what I did is I took my razor knife and I cut off a corner from another piece of oak and made this, I guess you could call it a splinter. Made two of them. And I put super glue down in the hole and super glue on the peg, and I tapped it in there with a hammer. And then I hit it with my zip kicker, and pretty much now it's already cured up. But I'm going to leave it for a few more minutes, and I'll just run it through a table saw again and trim these two pieces off, and bada bing, I've saved this piece of wood. That hole I'm going to reuse. Oh gosh, it's always something. It's raining. So I forgot that the wood that I bought for my door stops, I bought a 1x4 that I'm going to rip in half, more or less in half. Okay. But I've already got my saw set for the thickness that I cut this, and I don't want to set it again because it's just right where I want it, right? So really, I ought to rip this in half first and then skin it down to its size. Trying to rip this, let's see how straight it is. It's really straight. That's the one thing nice about this oak board. You know, you could pick some pieces out. The wood is stable, you know, so it got a tiny bit of bow in it. So I guess I could raise the blade up to like 2 inches high. And I just hate doing that. Okay, I'm trying to make a decision here. I just measured the distance from here to there, and it's a little bit less than half an inch. 15 thousandths of an inch less than half of an inch. Let me show you the impact of what it is that I'm doing here. Let's put this seal back in place. Alright. And when we close the door, see the seal is sticking out. Now, I don't particularly care to see that. Not so much for aesthetics, but kind of like protecting the seal, right? So let's see how much. I think that's about a 1/16 of an inch. So there, I just set this thing for a 1/16. No, it's more than the 1/16 of an inch. It's about an eighth. Alright, so that would mean 5/8, not 11/16. I could trim this down another 1/16 of an inch. And it's just aesthetics, right? You know what I mean? How's it going to look? Right? It just looks like this is too thick. I mean, I am going to round off the corner some, you know, with a little router bit thing, but I'm going to go down to 5/8 on the thickness. Yeah, I reset the saw. I know I was hemming and hawing before, but I reset the saw because it just got a little bit too complicated for me. I ripped these first, this 1x4, I ripped it in half, and there's my little leftover piece. And I ran this through the saw again, and it trimmed off my little guys, right? So this is fine. So now I'm going to rip these this way down to 5/8. I'm going to do it first on my test piece to make sure I like it, and then I'll go ahead and rip all these. Slowly but surely we're going to get these things fitted into place to be my door stops for the bus. For my sample piece that I cut, I just set the depth of my blade, depth of the cut, to 1/2 inch, because that's what I measured. 1/2 inch high. That's what I measured, how deep the groove was in that door. And then I just dorked around with my fence and took multiple cuts until I got what felt like the equivalent to this drill bit, like this. And if you look, it's tight when I push out here, but when I push back here, it's loose. So I don't know how loose, kind of loose. So I knew that I wouldn't be too accurate in the cutting this way because it's hard to adjust my fence. I don't have a real precision adjustment for my fence, and it's a little bit of a crude, right? When you cinch this down, there's a clamp in here that tightens this boss here to this pipe, and then right before this gets fully tight, there's a finger on that side that tightens, and so this will move, right? But it's not all that perfect. It's kind of a quality, kind of a table saw from China, although it's good 30-40 years old, back when you can buy some pretty good stuff. It's got the cast iron wings, which is the reason why I bought it, not the sheet metal ones. So it's very precise in its flatness. All right, so sorry. So what we're doing now is we want to dado this thing. So I'm going to use my dado blade, and the hole plate that I had was just a beat piece of plywood. I'll show it to you, that I had from years and years ago, and I was using it to cut. Where did it go? All right. Maybe I missed. Dang, I could swear I tossed it in the garbage. Oh yeah, there it is. I mean, it's just this thing that I threw together one day that I needed it. And I was cutting steel with a carborundum blade, and the thing caught fire, and it burnt in two down here at the end. And so when you put this in here now, okay, it's it's not rigid enough to do precise work. So I decided to not make a basket and make a new one. So I got this material. This is a sink cut out from a countertop from new construction on a house. When they put the new countertop in, they got to cut the hole for the sink. So there's leftover pieces, this corian stuff, and I got me a piece. So I duplicated what I did here and made a new one for my dado blade. So the method to that madness is, I just copied this width, and then I ripped it with a table saw. So I had the piece, and then I started a little bit big, and then I very carefully tightened up my measurement here to match this piece so it'll fit in here nicely, side to side. Okay, it's very, very close fit. And then I took this piece and put it on top of that guy and used a pen, and I made my round marks. And I took my table saw and cut close as I could, and then I got to where I was just taking the line off. Then to finish it off, this is something I made a while back. I don't know where I got the piece of aluminum from, but I glued a piece of sandpaper to it, and I completely trashed the sandpaper out here. I just never replaced it. So I put this in the table saw so I could sand and have good 90-degree sanding. And it would be, imagine this with the sandpaper, you're just working like this. It's an absolute fabulous sanding method, and it also does really good for sharpening drill bits, believe it or not. And the sandpaper lasts a super, super long time. So this is years old, this piece of paper. I forget what I was doing here, but it was some abusive operation to the sandpaper. So anyway, I got this little coat hanger down here where I hang it for good luck. Alright, so then once I had this thing to where it would pop in there, let me lower my blade. Okay. It's not going to go down enough for the cut that I made, so let's just talk through it. It dropped in there, and it sits too deep in there. So to compensate for that, like I did on this one, I put Allen head set screws in here. And to do that, I drilled it out to 1/4 of an inch, and then I threaded it to 5/16 18. And so then I put that in there, like so. Alright, and I used the straight edge, tighten these screws and get them, all 4 of them equally so it wouldn't rock, and level with what I wanted. Then I took some Loctite thread sealant, thread lock, and I put a drip down in there so it would go around the threads. And then I took the Allen wrench, and I wiggled it back and forth a little bit so it could get around in there, and let it sit. And just as a little bit of a extra, I took super glue and I put a little tiny spot of super glue around the threads there. So this thing sits on there now. So then what I did is I put this guy in place. I'll use this one since it fits. I took 2 pieces of wood for safety, and I put them across my table saw with a clamp on each side, there and over there. Of course, my fence wasn't in place, to hold this thing down. And to help, I put a little splinter of wood in the middle so it would be pushing down firmly on this thing. And cranked up the saw, and I elevated the blade until my dado blade came through. So I have it set for 3/4 of an inch cut, because that's more than I need. So let me go ahead and change blades, and I'll finish my discussion. So the way the dado blade works, these side plates are thick on one side and thin on the other. So it causes the blade to wobble. Alright? And if you rotate these guys, let's see if I can do this with one hand, right? These rotate I can't do it with one hand. There we go. Alright. The blade rotates within. If I go all the way to one end of the extreme, the blade will turn straight. I guess it's this way. There. So now the blade is straight, and it works like a normal blade. So in addition to being able to spin it, you can also measure how wide the blade is. This side reads in millimeters, and the other side reads in inches. So what you do is you just dial this thing in to the width that you want the cut to be, like there for example, and then you tighten your nut down, and the amount of wobble that the blade has is how wide the cut is. And that's exactly what I did here with it set at 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so I got her set at 3/4 of an inch, give or take. It's just, the width of my dado right now is not a critical thing that I'm doing. I just got the width of the dado wider than I need. Okay, now this is going to fit in there just right. And I might be now set wider than when I cut this little test hole here. So I'm going to carefully do the operation like I did earlier. I'll just hold this down with my hand, my left hand, and crank the wheel with my right hand, because it's just barely going to touch on the edges, if at all. So I'll jack with the motor running. I'm going to jack the blade up until the blade hits underneath here and underneath there, and I'll know that because of I'll be able to feel it and hear the difference. And I'm going to do that just so I have the clearance. And then what we're going to do, we're going to take a piece of wood, something like this. We're going to clamp this piece of wood to my fence. All right, and that will allow me to move this over, and then the dado is going to be able to come up and cut into this piece of wood and not hurt anything like my fence. And so the reason why I'm doing it this way is because the depth of this is not critical. Right now I have it a little more than 1/2 of an inch deep. When I went and measured my trim, it's far less. It's more like 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to set this dimension to be a little more than 3/8 of an inch or 3/8, whatever. I'm going to double check what I need by measuring this piece, and that's going to be done by this left and right adjustment. The critical part of this cut is how deep the dado is, and for that I'll be able to use raising the blade with my wheel down here, which is a very easy adjustment to make in small increments and very accurately. So the method I'm going to use is I'm going to set my width to where I want it first using my test piece, and then maybe the back side of my test piece I'll raise the dado blade until it just starts to cut, and I'm going to measure how much I'm removing until I get, is it 7/64? Yeah, 1/64 of an inch less than an eighth. I want 7/64 of material removed off the piece of wood. And once I get it cut correctly with my test piece or any other kind of test piece, then I'll go ahead and cut all this. This I've already got it cut to 5/8 of an inch thick by 1.5 inches wide, all 3 pieces. So we're all dialed in. I got my wood clamped on here, and I just used this wood to hold that down for safety when I brought the blade up, and the width of the cut is almost exactly where it was when I said it before, so that dial's pretty accurate, I guess. And I made my test cut by pushing this test piece through like so, okay? And that's the cut. And when we put this on our table saw, by slowly raising my blade, you can see I got that like right on the button, matching this drill bit. So I know I got what I want. And I'm now ready to go ahead and put that rip cut in all these pieces. And I don't have to worry about, you know, accidentally wiggling my workpiece and cutting off too much wood, because the way this is set up, any wiggle that I give it is going to cut less off, right? So if I don't press down hard enough, right, it's going to cut less. If I drift away from my fence, it's going to cut less. So I don't have much risk in damaging my piece. Doing it the other way, by putting the piece upright against here with a conventional blade, if I wiggle a little bit, I'm cutting off extra wood. See the difference? So I got a little bit of discovery here. It's a challenge, but this is something I faced before. This is no big deal. When this was one piece of 1x4, it was damn near perfectly straight. Now it's got a little bit of a side-to-side bow and a whole bunch of bow in it this way. It's just from the cut and the, I guess, internal tension in the wood. It allows it to spring that way. So we still have to use the wood. The wood is fine. It's going to work perfectly fine for what I'm doing, but running it through the saw, you've got choices to make, right? Which way do I put it? Is it going to make a difference? And I'll show you what I mean. If I put the wood this way, and now it's bowed like this, I've got to hold it down really firmly, right, in order to get the depth of my cut to be correct. If this thing floats up in the middle of my cut, then my cut's going to be light. And I prefer to not have to use a heavy hand when I'm using a power tool. If I have a slip, right, and I'm pressing lightly, I'll have a small injury. If I have a slip while I'm pressing firmly, I'm going to have a worse injury. So taking that into consideration, I put the wood this way. I don't have to push down hardly at all, and I'm going to get the full depth of my cut. Now, for a left and right bow up against the table saw fence, if the bow is this way, we're going to tend to touch at the extreme ends of my fence and have a hollow in the middle, and it's going to change the way my cut is. If I'm cutting on this side of the wood with a conventional blade, for example, it's going to come out skinny in the middle and wider at the ends. With this operation, if I'm pushing through here, and because it's bowed, it doesn't go all the way in like it looks like that for in the middle, then the depth of my cut this way is going to be light. So the way we want this to have a bow is this way. So I've got choices. Since I've already set the wood this way up and down the way I want it, I can spin it around this way to make sure I get the bow going the right way in that direction. How about that? Now we're ready to cut the length. And I think I might leave that for another day because it's dark out there. So I decided, just for the heck of it, since I'm really not going to have too much productivity this evening, to do a little test here. I went and got the brand new piece that I bought the other day. I got this at Lowe's. I got this at Lowe's like a year ago. It was a damaged piece. I paid $1 for it. They should have just gave me the damn thing, but I wanted to make sure that the new piece is the same as the old piece. It's made of different materials. This one's got some white plastic in it, and the old one had all brown plastic in it, but pretty much look the same otherwise, other than being dirty. So that's cool. So what I did is I took my piece here and I clamped it down tightly to my table saw table, and I was able to push it, scoot it right in there. It seemed to have just the right amount of tension, and it takes quite a bit of effort to pull that thing out of there. So, bada bing.